There is a word that appears in ancient Roman medical texts that scholars puzzled over for decades. Paniculus. A small word. It means roughly, little tail. A looped or knotted cloth. And for a long time, no one knew what it referred to. Then someone read it again. In context. Next to other household items. Next to linens. Next to records of women's domestic supplies. The answer was obvious. Hidden not because it was obscure, but because no one had thought to look. That single word cracked open an entire world. A world that half of all humans who ever lived had inhabited, every month, for 300,000 years. A world that official history had almost completely ignored. This is the story of what ancient women actually did. What they knew. What they invented. And why the answer is far more extraordinary than anyone expected. Long before Egypt, long before Rome, before any written language or recorded law, women menstruated. Every woman, in every population, on every continent, for hundreds of thousands of years. And every one of them solved the same problem. Researchers believe early women used what their environments gave them. Soft moss from riverbanks, folded leaves, animal hides scraped thin, dried plant fibers packed and shaped by hand. The materials changed with geography. The problem never did. This is the part of prehistory almost no one discusses. While archaeologists debate hunting strategies and migration routes, the daily physical reality of half the prehistoric population has been largely set aside. But evidence is beginning to surface. In burial sites across Europe and the Near East, folded textile fragments have been found near the pelvic regions of female remains. Some carry organic residues suggesting absorption. Some appear deliberately placed rather than simply worn. What were they? Researchers are still debating, but some now believe these fragments are the earliest physical evidence of menstrual management in human history. And that was nowhere near the strangest part. Once civilization emerged, the solutions became more sophisticated and far stranger than anyone anticipated. In ancient Egypt, women had access to one of the most medically precise cultures in the ancient world. The Ebers papyrus, dating to approximately 1550 BCE, contains detailed instructions for gynecological treatments, menstrual regulation, and pain relief. Egyptian women used softened papyrus rolled or folded and used internally. Linen was also used, folded and secured with a wrapped undergarment. And linen in Egypt was not ordinary. It was considered sacred, associated with purity and the divine. But the Egyptian approach went far beyond materials. Their medical texts describe remedies for painful or irregular menstruation, using herbal compounds drunk as teas, plant and honey suppositories, and fumigation treatments where women sat over heated bowls of aromatic herbs. The goal was not simply to manage blood flow. It was to restore the body to balance. Egyptian physicians understood menstrual health as directly connected to fertility and overall well-being. A disrupted cycle was a medical problem requiring treatment. Many of the herbs they recorded, including fenugreek, castor oil, and various aromatics, have since been studied for their mild uterotonic and anti-inflammatory properties. They had no clinical trials. They had centuries of careful observation, and some of what they recorded was remarkably close to correct. Then the story moves to Rome, and the mystery deepens. Roman women moved through public life constantly. They ran households, managed businesses, attended ceremonies, worked in markets. Life did not stop. And yet the Roman world had powerful and contradictory feelings about menstruation. Pliny the Elder, writing in the 1st century CE, devoted significant space in his natural history to what he believed menstrual blood could do. His claims are extraordinary. That it could kill crops, blunt iron, drive dogs mad, but it could also repel harmful magic and protect against evil. Pliny was not a fringe thinker. He was one of the most widely read naturalists in the ancient world. His views reflected a widespread Roman belief that menstruation was simultaneously dangerous and powerful, a force that could harm or protect, depending entirely on how it was understood. What did Roman women actually use? Evidence from Herculaneum and Pompeii, preserved under volcanic ash, points to soft wool cloth as the primary material. Wool was abundant, washable, and comfortable. Some researchers believe Roman women used secured woolen pads held in place by wrapped undergarments, a design that in concept closely mirrors the modern sanitary pad. That word paniculus appears in this exact context. A looped or knotted cloth, common enough that it had its own name. The vocabulary existed because the practice was ordinary. Now, Greece. And the picture changes again. Hippocrates, writing in the 5th century BCE, treated menstruation not as a nuisance, but as a key diagnostic tool. The regularity of a woman's cycle told a physician something essential about her health. Too little blood suggested a blockage. Too much indicated excess heat. Treatment aimed always at equilibrium. Greek women used folded wool or linen. But Greek medical tradition also developed a remarkable pharmacological toolkit. Artemisia, a plant genus named after Artemis, goddess of women and childbirth, was used to regulate difficult cycles. Wild carrot seeds, now actively studied for contraceptive properties, were recorded as taken strategically. Pennyroyal, known to stimulate uterine contractions, was so commonly used it became standard domestic knowledge. These were not superstitions. They were pharmacological interventions built from generations of women's observation and shared understanding. But almost none of it was written down in any archive that survived. Because here is where the story goes, somewhere historians did not expect. Most of what ancient women knew did not come from official medical texts. It moved between women, from mothers to daughters, from healers to apprentices, between women who shared the same household and the same biological reality. It lived in practice, in conversation, in knowledge passed without ceremony from one generation to the next. What survived did so by accident. In Roman legal documents mentioning the cost of laundering women's linens. In household inventories listing soft cloths among feminine items. In medical texts where male physicians transcribed, often imperfectly, remedies described to them by female patients or midwives. The picture is partial, but every fragment points to the same truth. Ancient women were not helpless. They were managing their bodies with the same competence they brought to everything else. In ancient China, the same intelligence appeared in a different form. The Huangdi Neijing understood menstruation as the visible expression of a woman's vital energy and her relationship with the organs of digestion and reproduction. Menstrual irregularity was treated with acupuncture, herbal medicine, dietary guidance, and rest. Tang Dynasty household texts suggest monthly cloth pads were standard domestic items, washed, dried in private, and reused. Now, here is the counterintuitive twist, the one that changes everything. For most of the 20th century, Western scholars assumed menstruation in ancient societies was a burden women suffered in silence, something shameful, a mark of biological inferiority. The evidence contradicts this almost entirely. In many indigenous cultures of the Americas, a girl's first menstruation was celebrated publicly, with ceremony. It marked the beginning of her power, her connection to the cycles of the moon and the rhythms of planting and harvest. The knowledge she received was considered among the most significant she would ever be given. In some cultures of sub-Saharan Africa, menstrual blood was used in protective rituals, applied to doorways, incorporated into medicines believed to shield households from harm. The power Pliny feared was, in these traditions, a power women held deliberately and used. In ancient India, Vedic texts describe first menstruation as a cosmic event requiring ceremony and honor. Special foods, rest, and specific practices were prescribed not as punishment, but as reverence. Menstruation was not universally associated with shame. That is a modern and historically specific idea, and it was not the one that dominated most of human history. What was universal, what appears across every culture and every period with extraordinary consistency, is this. Women knew their bodies. They observed, They tested. They shared what they discovered. They built entire systems of plant knowledge addressing pain, irregular cycles, and heavy flow. They did this without institutions, without laboratories, without any formal support structure of any kind. And much of what they built never entirely disappeared. The plants Egyptian women used to regulate difficult cycles are still studied in pharmacological research today. The washable, reusable menstrual cloth is now marketed as a modern eco-conscious innovation. The understanding that rest and warmth during menstruation aids recovery, dismissed by 20th century productivity culture, has fully returned in contemporary women's health practice. The knowledge went underground, into family tradition, into herbal medicine, into the quiet domestic spaces that official history rarely enters, and it is still coming back. Go back now to that single Latin word. Paniculus. A looped cloth. Small enough to fit in a household inventory. Ordinary enough to have a name. Common enough that a Roman woman writing her domestic accounts did not need to explain what it was. She knew. Every woman in the household knew. 300,000 years of women managing their bodies with intelligence, care, and quiet dignity. Not in shame. Not in silence. In the same practical, competent way they managed everything else that mattered. The history was never missing. We simply had not thought to look for it.